Picture a schoolyard in the year 1915. The air smells of turned earth and cut grass, and a group of students kneel in carefully measured rows, driving stakes into soft soil with the focused intensity of engineers. They are not simply planting vegetables. They are learning to read and command the land itself, a skill that for many of them will mean the difference between survival and death within just a few years. This is the story of how one quietly revolutionary educational experiment fused geometry, strategy, and the raw logic of survival into a single muddy plot of ground, and, well, why those lessons echo through every trench and dugout of the Great War. The living classroom, geometry pressed into soil. The reformers who designed school garden programs in 1915 understood something most classrooms did not. The body learns what the mind alone forgets. Students were handed string lines, stakes, and hand-drawn templates, then asked to translate paper geometry into the physical world. A bed, measuring 2.4 meters by 1.2 meters, was not an abstract rectangle. It was something you kneeled inside, something whose edges you had personally staked into resistant ground. Teachers trained in the practical man. Philosophy insisted that students create scale maps before setting a single stake, then carry those maps to the earth and reproduce them at full scale using nothing but a measuring rod and twine. This was, in every meaningful sense, the same cognitive process a field engineer would use to plan a communications trench or a section commander would use to orient a listening post in no man's land. The trench behind the lesson. Tactical geometry under fire. Step from that sunlit garden into the grey, compressed world of the Western Front, and the connections become visceral. Trenches were never dug straight. Any soldier who understood enfilading fire knew that a straight trench offered a machine gun, a clean sweep of its entire length. Instead, they were built in transverse sections, short, angled bays, connected by zigzagging walls, containing blasts and limiting casualties. The geometry was deliberate and life-saving. The same minds that had divided a school garden into measured quadrants were now dividing death's landscape into survivable segments. Building shelter. The ingenuity of the dugout. When the line stabilized in 1915, soldiers had to live in the ground for months, sometimes even years. Timber was salvaged from ruined farmhouses, and corrugated iron stripped from collapsed barns. A well-built dugout descended 6 to 8 feet below ground level, its entrance carefully angled away from shell fire and its roof supported by pit-prop timbers. The men who built best understood how materials behave under load, that a beam spanning 5 feet unsupported would eventually fail, and that drainage must always lead away from sleeping areas. These, though, were not trench lessons. They were the accumulated fieldcraft of a rural generation pressed into extraordinary service. Camouflage and the art of not being seen. No skill proved more immediately valuable than the ability to read terrain for concealment. Camouflage, well, it barely existed formally in 1915. It was improvised by soldiers who broke their outlines with cut vegetation, darkened their faces with mud and charcoal, and learned from gamekeepers and poachers in their ranks. Students who had spent months observing plant spacing, recording which rows thrived and which failed, had trained their eyes for granular landscape reading. Structurally identical to the range cards and observation logs maintained by forward observers in the trenches. The echo across time. What we carry forward. Stand back from both the garden and the trench and see them as two expressions of the same irreducible human skill. The ability to read a space, plan within constraints, build shelter, and maintain discipline when comfort is absent. These are not, just historical curiosities. They are the foundational competencies of every bushcraft practitioner and every individual who has thought seriously about preparedness. The students of 1915 did not know they were being trained for war. They thought they were growing vegetables. But in pressing geometry into the earth, in learning to see a plot of ground as a problem to be solved with logic and care, they were developing a quality of mind that no classroom lecture could have produced. The world those young hands were preparing for was brutal beyond imagination. The tools they were given, however, were timeless. If this episode opened your eyes to the deeper roots of Fieldcraft and survival thinking, subscribe to Fieldcraft Chronicles and share this video with anyone who values history, self-reliance, and the enduring art of reading the land. Every share keeps these forgotten stories alive. We'll see you in the field.